What happens when the CEO of a luxury hotel chain goes undercover as a concierge and uncovers a scam that's been bleeding his company for years? Franklin Lowell stood in front of the mirror in the staff locker room of his 17th location, a high-end business hotel just outside Chicago, and tucked in his plain navy shirt. No tie, no expensive watch, no tailored suit. His usual salt and pepper beard had been shaved clean. Colored contacts, a slight Midwestern accent, and a made-up backstory as a trainee from Minneapolis named Greg completed the look. It had been 10 years since Franklin bought the hotel chain from its aging founder. Back then, it had just 5 locations. Now it had 17 scattered across the country. Most were doing fine, but this one had raised flags. The numbers didn't add up. Corporate clients were dropping suddenly with no real explanation. A few loyal ones were still around but had slashed their bookings. Guest satisfaction scores were dropping. The manager's reports blamed COVID after effects and changing travel trends. But Franklin had heard enough excuses. He wanted to see for himself. He'd never met this location's staff in person. Most had joined in the last 2 years. He kept his distance on purpose. He didn't want any special treatment or fake smiles. That's why they didn't recognize him. And his assistant back at HQ made sure no one knew he was coming. Franklin stepped into the lobby. The front desk area gleamed. The marble floors had been polished and the air smelled faintly of sandalwood. But the staff behind the desk looked tired. One young man, maybe 22, had bags under his eyes and was typing like a machine. "Greg, right? You're the concierge trainee?" A voice asked behind him. He turned. A woman in her mid-30s held out a hand. "I'm Fiona Evans, front office supervisor." Her tone was polite, but clipped, like she was on autopilot. "Yes, ma'am," Franklin said, giving a small nod. "Here to learn the ropes." "Let's go then." She walked him through the basics: how to log service requests, how to handle guest complaints, where the extra toothbrushes were. Fiona was sharp, efficient, but something about her felt guarded, like she was constantly watching her back. A few hours into the shift, Franklin noticed something else. There was a clear tension between Fiona and the general manager, Curtis. Curtis was a tall man with slicked-back hair and a Bluetooth headset he never seemed to take off. He barely acknowledged Franklin when they crossed paths. "Who's the new guy?" Curtis asked Fiona at one point, not even looking at him. "Concierge trainee. Greg." "Ha," he muttered, then walked off. Around lunchtime, Franklin helped a guest named Mr. Donahue, who was checking in for a 5-day corporate stay. While confirming the room, Franklin noticed something odd on the invoice. "Is this rate right?" he asked Fiona quietly. She glanced at it. "Yeah, that's what Curtis charges the corporate clients now." Franklin frowned. "It's $150 above the contracted rate for this company." Fiona gave him a look. "Don't ask questions," she said under her breath. "Just charge it." He didn't say anything, but something in his gut twisted. 2 hours later, he caught Fiona in the back office while she was eating a granola bar for lunch. "You seem like someone who knows what's going on around here," he said carefully. She put down the wrapper and looked up. "Look, I don't know who you are or what you're trying to do, but if you're trying to ask about Curtis, don't. People have been fired for less." "I'm not trying to get anyone fired," Franklin said. "I'm just trying to understand." She narrowed her eyes. "He overbills the corporate clients, especially the ones that don't double-check their invoices. Adds cleaning fees that don't exist. Charges minibar items no one ordered. Then he blames it on system glitches. I've said something once. I got written up the next week for a bad attitude." Franklin kept his voice low. "How long has this been going on?" "Over a year." He sat back in the chair, pretending to be stunned like any normal trainee would be. But inside, his heart was pounding. Later that evening, Franklin watched Curtis chat up a corporate guest, all smiles and fake charm. The man was slick. Too slick. He slipped into the back office and found a file cabinet. Fiona had said the paper invoices were kept there for the manual overrides. He opened the drawers and flipped through them. Dozens of corporate invoices. All had inflated charges. Some by as much as $300 a night. He took photos with the hidden button camera in his shirt. That night, as he lay in the modest employee dorm room his team had set up for him, Franklin stared at the ceiling. He thought about the loyal clients who'd stuck with them for years and were now getting robbed. He thought about Fiona working hard, speaking up, and getting punished. He thought about Curtis walking around like he owned the place. And he thought about the fact that this was his company. Tomorrow, he would dig deeper. Something was about to break. Franklin arrived early the next morning, stepping through the staff entrance before the sun climbed over the skyline. The back corridor lights flickered faintly. He passed the time block, clocked in like everyone else, and made his way to the concierge desk. The lobby was quiet, just the low hum of cleaning crews finishing up and a bellhop unloading a delivery cart. He barely settled in when Fiona walked in, rubbing the side of her neck. Her uniform blazer looked slightly wrinkled and she carried an open binder under her arm. "You're early," she said, sounding more surprised than anything else. "I figured I'd get a head start," Franklin replied. "Quiet hours are the best for learning." She gave a short nod, then gestured toward the guest services monitor. "If you're serious about learning, start with the open requests. Most of them are from floor 7. AC units keep shorting out." He scanned the list. 23 open requests, several marked pending for over a week. "Does maintenance not cover that floor?" "Technically, they do," she said, dropping the binder on the counter. "But our lead maintenance guy quit last month. Curtis decided not to replace him. Said we were overstaffed." Franklin turned to her. "So who's handling repairs?" "Whoever's on shift that day. Mostly Marcus from housekeeping. He's been filling in when he can." He made a mental note. That matched what he was seeing: poor repair response times, guest complaints about slow service, and a rising number of cancellation notes citing outdated infrastructure. The overbilling was only one part of the problem. The whole operation was running leaner than it should. Around mid-morning, Franklin met Marcus. He was in his late 40s, wore a faded name tag, and had a limp that made every step seem heavier than the last. He was fixing a vent cover loose above the elevator shaft. "You the new concierge?" Marcus asked without looking down. "Yeah. Greg." Marcus tightened a screw. "You here to hand me another list of broken stuff?" Franklin shook his head. "Just wanted to thank you. Sounds like you've been covering more than your share." Marcus exhaled. "If something breaks and no one fixes it, eventually a guest complains. Then Curtis yells. So yeah. I try to stay ahead." "How many hours you working a week?" Marcus lowered the drill. "They've got me at 38. But I'm here 6 days a week. Most days I stay late. They just don't log the extra time." Franklin's jaw tightened. "Why not?" "Because Curtis says we're not allowed overtime. Calls it budget discipline." Marcus wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "I've got a daughter in college. I can't afford to lose this job." Franklin nodded. "I hear you." The elevator beeped. Franklin stepped in and rode it back to the lobby, his thoughts racing. Staff were being squeezed, hours cut, responsibilities increased, corners shaved. And no one dared say anything because they couldn't afford the risk. At the concierge desk, he pulled up the day's incoming guest list. He spotted a name he recognized: Clara Harwell, regional travel manager for one of their biggest clients. Her company had scaled back bookings at this location by nearly 80%. She was checking in that afternoon. He spent the next few hours shadowing Fiona, observing how check-ins were handled. Fiona was firm but professional, juggling multiple guests at once, all while fielding back-end calls and tracking luggage delays. But when Curtis entered the lobby just after noon, everything shifted. He strutted across the floor like he was walking onto a stage, his Bluetooth earpiece blinking. He made a beeline for the front desk. "Evans," he said, "you didn't process the minibar restocks from yesterday." "I ran the inventory. We didn't need a restock." He leaned in. "That's not your call. You asked me to cut waste." "We've got 3 unopened pallets in the basement." Curtis's voice dropped. "Don't make me remind you who signs off on your schedule." Fiona didn't respond. She simply nodded and turned back to the computer. Franklin watched the exchange, silent, taking mental notes. Curtis wasn't just cutting corners, he was actively pushing unnecessary charges. That explained the minibar fees he'd seen on invoices. At 2:15, Clara Harwell arrived. She wore a charcoal suit, carried a leather laptop bag, and moved with practiced efficiency. Franklin stepped forward. "Welcome, Ms. Harwell. We have you in room 812. May I assist you with anything while you get settled?" She gave him a brief smile. "No, thank you. I'll just need a copy of the billing summary." Franklin handed her the pre-printed folio Curtis had approved. She scanned it, then frowned. "This isn't right," she said. "There's a business center fee here. I haven't even checked in yet." Franklin pretended to be confused but made a note. "Let me talk to my supervisor and get that adjusted." As he walked back to the office, Curtis intercepted him. "What's the issue?" "She flagged a charge that doesn't belong." Curtis waved a hand. "She's a bean counter. They all complain. Just tell her it's part of the corporate package." Franklin didn't move. "But that's not true." Curtis lowered his voice. "You don't get paid to think, new guy. Just do what I tell you." Franklin held his stare. "Right?" Curtis walked off, muttering something under his breath. Back at the desk, Clara was waiting. Fiona caught Franklin's eye but said nothing. "Ms. Harwell," Franklin said, "I'll be removing that charge. We appreciate your business." Clara narrowed her eyes slightly. "Thank you. Who's the manager here?" "You'll find him in the office to the left of the elevators." She nodded and walked away. By late afternoon, Franklin had seen enough. Fiona was running short-staffed. Marcus was being used like a utility worker with no support, and Curtis was inflating charges, intimidating staff, and lying to guests. Franklin slipped into the admin office when Curtis stepped out for a smoke break. He opened the drawer where guest incident reports were filed. Most were filled out in full, but a handful, especially the ones mentioning billing issues, had been altered. The handwriting at the bottom was clearly different. Franklin took photographs of several and emailed them to a secure folder his assistant had set up. Then he moved to the employee files. Fiona's record had 3 written warnings. One was for failure to follow protocol. Another for confrontational tone. Both described routine operational disagreements. They read more like retaliation than discipline. Curtis returned just as Franklin stepped out of the office. "Where were you?" he asked. "Looking for the keycards. A guest locked himself out on 9. Curtis narrowed his eyes but said nothing. That night, Franklin skipped the employee dorm. He booked a room under his real name and stayed on the 9th floor, reviewing everything he'd gathered. The photos, the invoices, the altered reports, the testimonies. He called his assistant. "Get legal on standby," he said. "I need to do this properly. Tomorrow I'm ending this." He hung up and stared out the window. Below, the lobby bustled. Bellhops moved carts. Guests checked in. Fiona was still at the front desk. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about trust. His trust in his own people. His responsibility to protect those who kept the business running. That responsibility started now. Franklin stood by the service elevator, hidden from the main lobby camera's view. His phone buzzed once in his pocket, confirmation from his legal team. Everything was in place. The evidence had been reviewed, contracts checked, and necessary documentation prepared. All he had to do now was step forward. But he didn't walk straight to the front desk. Instead, he followed the hallway toward the narrow break room where he knew Fiona would be finishing her short lunch. She sat alone, stirring the last bit of yogurt in a plastic cup, her blazer folded neatly over the back of her chair. Her posture was stiff, like she never really relaxed even off the floor. Franklin stepped inside and shut the door behind him. "I need 5 minutes," he said. "Not as Greg. As Franklin Lowell." Fiona set the cup down without blinking. "You're joking." He pulled the ID badge from his pocket, the one he'd tucked away since arriving. She stared at it, then at him, eyes narrowing as she pieced it together. "You're the CEO?" "I am." She leaned back, arms crossed. "So this was some kind of trap? To see who complains?" "No. It was to see who's holding this place together while being ignored." She paused, then let out a low breath. "You picked the right location. I picked the one I didn't understand. Turns out I didn't understand it because someone was making sure I couldn't. Her voice was quieter now. Then you saw it. All of it. Franklin nodded. More than I wanted to. But not more than I needed to. She looked down at her hands, then back up. So what happens now? I'm going to make it right. But I need your help for the next part. Fiona stood, slid on her blazer, and picked up the binder from the counter. Then let's go. They walked to the lobby where Curtis stood at the front desk, tapping on a tablet, his Bluetooth still blinking. He didn't notice them until they were nearly at the counter. Franklin stopped a few feet away. Curtis. Curtis turned, his mouth already opening to dismiss him when he froze. His eyes flicked from Franklin's face to the ID badge clipped to his pocket. Mr. Lowell, he said slowly. Guests bustled quietly behind them, unaware of the moment unfolding. A valet cart rolled past. Fiona stood to the side, silent. I need to speak with you. Office. Now, Franklin said. Curtis hesitated, then nodded and walked toward the hallway. Franklin followed, closing the office door behind them. Curtis gestured toward one of the chairs. Look, I had no idea you were. That's the problem. Curtis stopped moving. Franklin set a folder on the desk. Overbilling. Falsified incident logs. Unauthorized charges to long-term corporate clients. Staff intimidation. Failure to report maintenance delays. Forced unpaid labor hours. Curtis's face paled. I can explain. No, you can't. I have the invoices. I have internal reports. I have guest complaints that were altered in your handwriting. Curtis's voice cracked. This location was bleeding money. I made adjustments. You exploited the trust of our partners to pad numbers. You intimidated staff into silence. You falsified financial reports and created a hostile work environment. You are relieved of your duties effective immediately. Curtis stepped back. You can't do this. You'll be escorted out by security within the hour. HR will contact you regarding your severance review, which is now under legal hold. Leave your badge and keys on the desk. Curtis didn't move. Franklin opened the door. 2 uniformed security staff already waiting stepped in. The taller one nodded once. Escort him out. Curtis opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He dropped his badge on the desk and walked out without another word. Franklin followed him into the hallway. Fiona was still nearby. She didn't say anything, just watched as Curtis was led through the lobby and out the main doors. A few staff stopped what they were doing, eyes wide. No one spoke. Franklin turned to Fiona. Gather the department leads. 30 minutes. Conference room B. She nodded once and moved quickly. Half an hour later, Franklin stood at the head of a long table. Fiona sat to his right. Across from him were the heads of housekeeping, food and beverage, sales, and facilities. Most looked tense, unsure what to expect. I owe you all an apology, Franklin began. This location has been operating under leadership that didn't reflect the values of this company. That changes today. No one spoke. He continued. I've seen the conditions you've been working under. The short staffing. The unacknowledged overtime. The pressure to lie to guests. That ends now. The sales lead, a thin woman in her early 40s with ink stains on her fingers, raised her hand slightly. What does that mean for us? Are you bringing in someone else? I'm naming Fiona Evans interim general manager effective immediately. Full authority. Corporate will support her with additional staffing and resources within 72 hours. Department leads will be included in budget planning and scheduling decisions. No more unilateral cuts. The head of facilities, a man with grease under his nails and a bandage on his thumb, leaned forward. We're down 2 techs. We've been asking for months. We'll hire 2 more. And we'll bring in outside contractors to handle the backlog starting tomorrow. Another hand went up. The housekeeping lead. We've been running with 3 housekeepers per shift. We need at least 5. You'll have them. Fiona will coordinate with corporate to fast-track hiring. Franklin turned to Fiona. You'll also be reviewing all past disciplinary write-ups under Curtis. Anything retaliatory or unsupported will be removed from employee records. Fiona nodded. Understood. The room was quiet again. Then the sales lead spoke. What about the clients? Some of them stopped working with us. We dropped from 23 monthly bookings to 5. I've already scheduled calls with each of them. I'll be doing those personally. We'll reimburse every improper charge. And I'll be transparent about what happened here. The head of food and beverage, who hadn't spoken yet, raised his hand slowly. Do we tell the staff? Yes. This afternoon. I'll address everyone together. They deserve to hear it straight. Franklin dismissed the meeting and walked to the back corridor with Fiona. She stopped him before he reached the stairwell. You didn't have to do this personally. Yes, I did. She looked at him for a long moment. Then I'm glad you did. He turned and started up the stairs. There was still more to do. But for the first time in months, he felt the gears begin to shift. Not because of a memo. Not because of a metric. But because someone had finally looked. He had looked. And he wasn't done yet. Franklin stood at the edge of the ballroom, adjusting the microphone clip to his collar. The staff had gathered in full housekeeping, front desk, maintenance, food service, laundry, every department represented, lined up in rows of banquet chairs usually reserved for corporate mixers. It was the first time many of them had seen him in person, let alone in uniform, only days before. The room buzzed with quiet tension. No one knew what to expect. When the last chair was filled, Franklin stepped forward. I'm Franklin Lowell. I own this place, and I owe you the truth. The room stilled. I've spent the last 4 days working alongside you under a different name. I did it because numbers and reports weren't telling me the full story about this hotel. What I found was worse than anything I expected. A few heads lowered. Others sat up straighter. I saw a team doing everything it could to keep this place running, despite being stretched beyond reason. I saw people filling roles they weren't hired for, covering for others who never showed up, and working hours that no one was recording. And I saw leadership that used fear to keep you silent. He paused. That ends now. A few staff exchanged glances. Curtis has been terminated. Permanently. His actions violated company policy, legal standards, and basic decency. No one else will be punished for speaking up. Fiona Evans is now acting general manager. She'll have full hiring authority and will be backed by corporate support. A hand rose in the second row. It belonged to a young man in a room service apron, his fingers stained from coffee filters. What about our hours? I've been clocking out at 4 but staying until 6 just to finish trays. From now on, all hours worked will be logged and compensated. Fiona will arrange for back pay review. If you've worked off the clock in the past 90 days, you'll be paid for that time. Another hand, this time from a woman near the back, older, with a faded housekeeping badge hanging from a frayed lanyard. Will more people be hired? We're running double sections every day. Yes. We've already approved 5 new hires for housekeeping, 3 for maintenance, and 2 for front desk. Hiring starts this week. Until then, no one is to work beyond their posted hours without approval and compensation. A murmur rippled through the room. Franklin scanned their faces. You've all been carrying a load that wasn't yours to carry. That stops now. This hotel doesn't run because of leadership. It runs because of you. Because of the way you show up when no one's watching. I saw it firsthand, and I won't forget it. He stepped back and handed the floor to Fiona. She didn't speak from behind the podium. Instead, she walked to the center of the room, hands at her sides. I know a lot of you don't trust management. I don't blame you. I've worked here long enough to see what happens when you speak up. But I promise you, that's going to change. She let the words hang for a moment. My first action is to meet with each department lead individually. I want to hear directly from you what you need, no filters, no corporate jargon. After that, I'll work with HR to audit every write-up issued over the past year. If it was retaliatory or unsupported, it's gone. No appeal needed. Franklin stepped up beside her. We're not here to fix everything in a day, but we are here to start. And we're not going anywhere. The room was quiet for a few seconds. Then, slowly, someone began to clap. Spread, uneven at first, then stronger. Not loud, not theatrical, just steady. The kind of applause that carried relief more than excitement. After the meeting, Franklin moved quietly through the lobby. The front desk had picked up with the afternoon wave of check-ins. Marcus passed by, toolbox in hand, and gave a short nod, not out of courtesy but acknowledgement. A silent understanding. Upstairs, Franklin sat in the manager's office, now stripped of Curtis's personal items. Fiona joined him, holding a legal pad filled with names and times. I've scheduled department meetings over the next 2 days. We'll need someone from HR present for the disciplinary reviews. I'll send someone from HQ. Not anyone local. Too much bias in the district office. She nodded. We'll also need a temp staffing agency on standby. Even if we hire fast, we're still short for at least 3 weeks. I'll have our vendor manager send over the best options. Use whoever you trust. She hesitated. There's one more thing. He looked up. 2 of the night shift employees haven't shown up since word spread about Curtis leaving. I think they were helping him with the billing adjustments. I can't prove anything yet, but it's a pattern. Then pull their access cards. Put them on leave pending investigation. If they were involved, I want them out. She wrote that down without responding. The next morning, Franklin met with Clara Harwell, the regional travel manager whose invoice had been tampered with. They sat in the business lounge over coffee. She didn't waste time. I appreciate the refund, but that doesn't rebuild trust. My company won't risk another incident. You shouldn't have to. We've removed the manager responsible, refunded every flagged charge, and we're offering your team a dedicated liaison to monitor all future billing. No more blind invoices. She studied him for a moment. And the staff. Overhauling hiring, restoring hours, and rebuilding from the inside out. I spent days working beside them. They deserve better than what they got. She set her cup down. You've got one chance. If I see even one red flag, I pull all bookings indefinitely. I understand. By the end of the week, word had spread to other clients. Some reached out directly. Others waited. Franklin took every call himself. He didn't delegate a single one. 10 days later, the first of the new hires started. A man in his early 20s joined housekeeping, shadowing one of the veterans. A retired HVAC tech came out of retirement part-time to help maintenance. The tempo was still fast, the tasks still heavy, but for the first time in months, people weren't alone in carrying the weight. Franklin stood in the staff hallway on his final day at the property. Fiona joined him, holding a clipboard. We're still behind on deep cleans for rooms ending long-term stays. I'm shifting the second shift to cover it. Smart. She closed the clipboard. You really going back to corporate? I am. You going to do this at the other locations? He nodded. One by one. She leaned against the wall. Most CEOs wouldn't bother. I'm not most CEOs. She offered a dry smile. Yeah. I figured that out when you unclogged a shower drain with your bare hands. He laughed. Let's not make that a habit. As he walked toward the staff exit, a few employees waved from the hallway. Not out of obligation. Just acknowledgement. The kind that said he'd been seen and he'd seen them too. And as he stepped outside into the late afternoon light, he didn't feel like a CEO walking away from a problem. He felt like one who'd finally walked into it and stayed long enough to fix it.